Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to be going over how to screen for individual stocks or companies, as well as transactions that you can use both in different types of financial modeling. And it all starts on CapIQ in the top ribbon right here where it says screening. This is where you can screen for individual companies. You can conduct a really quick screen, search just for stocks, bonds, or transactions like we're going to go over in this part, or you can even save your own screenings from your historical screens that you may do for whatever reason. But in this first case, in these first couple of examples, we're going to be looking for individual companies. And the cool thing about CapIQ is that it has access to tons, literally hundreds of thousands of public and private companies. And when you screen for individual companies and individual industries, for example, you have at your fingertips information for a wide variety of different companies. But when it comes to financial modeling, maybe you're doing a comparable companies analysis, it's particularly helpful to look for public companies. And say you're about to make an investment in a certain industry and you're trying to find the best company based on fundamental details that would be privy to a strong investment. So say, your portfolio manager tasks you with finding the best retail company in the Russell 2000 stock index based on profitability, growth, and overall current valuation right now. And your job is to whittle down from hundreds of thousands of companies to a more manageable, couple dozen maybe that you can then research further. So in this first case, we're going to start right here in the companies section, left click. And here now you have access to a bunch of different criteria that you can use to whittle down the hundreds of thousands to a more digestible sum. We're going to start by looking for specific industries. Like I had said, we're looking for retail companies in the Russell 2000. So the first thing we're going to do is go over here into industry classifications, which, because I have used it many times, is in my links in the most used section. Or you can scroll down to company details where you have access to a bunch of other different criteria, including industry classification. So I'm going to left click here. And now I'm going to look specifically for individual retail companies because we're trying to whittle it down to look for only the companies in that specific space. Now, if you look here, these are the overall industries. Now, retail happens to be a subsector within consumer discretionary, as you can see right here in the retail section. And as you might have seen here, I can simply just type in retail and press enter, and it will bring me to the most relevant subsector that coincides with what I searched. Or we could just simply memorize which subsectors lie within each industry. And in this case, retailing lies within consumer discretionary. We can left click on that checkbox and add criteria if I want. Or if you really want to whittle it down for yourself, you can look at specific retailers, be it specialty, distributors, or internet retailers. In this case, though, we're just looking for the overall retail subsector. So that'll bring us down to about 930,000 companies. And I don't know about you, but I don't really want to look through all of those. So we're going to keep whittling this down. Remember, I had said that we're looking for Russell 2000 stock index companies. So we're going to, once again, we can pick indices in the most used section, or we can go into equity details right here, where we have access to a bunch of other criteria, including indices. And indices include the S&P 500, the Dow 30, or the Russell 2000, like I had said, and you can screen down based on all kinds of different indices from all around the world that you may want to look at, which will all bring down that 933,000. In this case, we want the Russell 2000, but it's important to click this drop-down menu because you want only companies that are primarily listed on the Russell 2000. Some companies are listed on multiple indexes, so it's important to click this drop-down if you only want companies listed on one single stock index. So when we've done this, this should bring it down. Sometimes CapIQ takes a couple seconds to load, but in a couple seconds here, we'll know the new total after this stops spinning. In the meantime, though, we can start to screen for more financial metrics as a means of really continuing to trim down our total search here. We want to only invest in or research further companies with strong financial health and strong relative financial performance. In this case, maybe we're trying to base our analysis on companies that are really succeeding in the realm of profitability in a retail space that it might be a little difficult to maintain profitability. So we're going to search by gross margin. to just demonstrate the search bar, we can just simply type in gross margin. All I typed in there was gross. I can continue to type out margin. And we have access now to several different ways of screening for gross margin. Now, typically, I prefer the CIQ operating metrics method of screening for gross margin rather than the credit health panel financials. The CIQ operating metrics are more in line with what the individual companies report and what CapIQ decides based on profitability. So when we have gross margin selected, we can actually go over here into open criterion. This is the best way to do it. And when you open this, you can now whittle down your choice of how you want to screen by gross margin. Based on retail, I think screening for companies that have gross margin greater than about 40% could whittle it down in a means that makes sense and is fair and is ruling out those companies that are less profitable than the ones that are generating gross margins at a higher clip. And we can add this criteria, and it should bring our number down a bit more, down to 26. So once again, we are looking for, and we have found those that are typically the most operationally profitable in the retail space, at least based on gross margin. So now that we've analyzed based on operational profitability in accordance with gross margin, we can now look for maybe some growth metrics that we can use as a means of bringing down our number. We can simply type in growth here in this top line, but maybe that's not giving us the best picture of the exact type of maybe revenue growth figure that we're looking for. So we can go down into financial information to get many more ratios and metrics that we can use to bring down our number, continue to bring down our numbers, and based on criteria that we actually want. Now, I want something that gives us a picture of the top line growth, because in retail, it's often really hard to grow top line growth these days. So maybe I'm not going to exactly screen by EBITDA growth or bottom line growth. I really want a picture of how the company is scaling its sales. And right here, total revenues, 5-year compounded annual growth rate. I think that 5 years is a good picture that we can use to get a picture of the past half decade of financial metrics as a means of seeing which have been the most consistent high growth players in the retail space. And I think maybe last 5 years growth of 5% would be pretty strong in a retail space that has seen a lot of undulation based on just financial performance. And as you can see there, we brought that down all the way down to 7 different companies that we can then continue to research further. And we started from what, 900,000 and brought down to 7 individual companies that maybe could represent strong investments for us if we look at them further and make our continued analysis based on a fundamental level. And there's no one way to screen. And maybe a different type of screen would bring us different types of companies. So now that we've brought down 900,000 companies down to 7, I want to show a couple different ways of looking for more specific ways of bringing those numbers down based on specific metrics for different industries, because certain metrics in certain industries may drive valuation more, and it may be more helpful to look at industry-specific metrics. And as you can see right here, industry-specific financials shows up in my most used because I think it's a really important way of screening, or it will show up once again in the financial information section right here, industry-specific financials. So I'm going to click this, and we're just going to be able to look at so many different industries here, whether it's metals and mining, retail, which is more specific to what we were looking at, insurance, credit union regulatory aspects, bank specific, oil and gas, literally everything. And I could spend hours looking through each of these individual crosshairs that will open up so many different more subsector specific and the more specific individual industry specific metrics. But I'm just going to show a couple here in the retail specific space that were more important for the individual screen that we were doing. Sales per square foot is a really important metric that gives a picture of a company's ability to generate sales in a more limited number of space. Maybe a higher sales per square foot could mean that the company is taking better advantage of their individual property or what have you. Their total franchise stores. It could be better to screen by companies that all franchise their individual stores, because that would make individual companies more comparable. For example, average weekly sales per store. Literally, there's so many different ways of analyzing based on a specific retail perspective that I think any screen that you do should incorporate at least a couple of these retail specific or overall industry specific based on what you're looking for metrics. And I think they're going to be really helpful for you. So that's one way of looking for company specific screening. But I think there's another important screen that we can do that shows how we can bring a screen into Microsoft Excel for further analysis and data manipulation. So now I'm going to say, bring up another scenario. Say that your portfolio manager has tasked you with finding the best building products company in the S&P 400, 500, and 600 based on profitability, growth profile, current valuation, affordability, and total returns track record. So that's a lot to unpack. But I think it's always the best place to start would be bringing down your overall industry classifications. So I'm going to go a little faster this time. Building products. Now, I don't exactly know where building products is going to be, so I'm just going to type in building products, and it brings me to the industrials industry. Okay, perfect. So I can click this checkbox. I've got now all the building products companies, both public and private, that are available on CapIQ. So let's add that criteria and keep moving down the line. This time it's starting a little smaller, only 30,000, which is nice. But remember, the indices that I was looking for were the 400, 500, and 600 of the S&P. And because it's in my most used, I'm just going to click it this time, or once again, it's in the equity details section for your reference. So click indices, and now we're going to bring it down based on these three indices. Remember, as I said before, going faster, we're picking the primary listing. We're going to double click, and double click, or we can use these little individual arrows here to move things back and forth, and then add criteria. We've got the indices that we want selected, and this should bring our total really far down. So now that we've clicked into that number 22, where we can now see all of the 22 companies that our initial screen of building products companies yielded, we can now start to look for specific columns that we want to look at based on financial metrics. So when we bring this data over to Microsoft Excel for further analysis, it'll be easier to see all of the numbers side by side based on all 22 companies that are in our overall prospective investment area, because we're only looking for companies in these specific indices. We aren't ruling out companies based on what CapIQ says. We only want to look at the individual metrics side by side of all the potential companies and base all of our final investment ideas based on our analysis rather than CapIQ's ability to eliminate prospective companies. So in order to do this, we're going to add new customized display columns over on the right-hand side that will give us a better picture of the financial metrics that we could use and analyze on our own merit to base an investment decision. So as soon as we click customize display columns, we're once again met with this search bar. And if we know an easy metric, we can just simply type it in. EBITDA margin, for example, would be a good way of getting a company's approximated cash flow profitability. We can just see here, EBITDA margin, display only, and we can left click because it doesn't have an open criterion selection. We just need the LTM data, for example, and now on this customized display column, as soon as we update our results, we will have access to a new column of data to look at. I'd also added in SG&A margin, excuse me, because it's another metric that we can use and is pretty easy to find based on this search bar. But if you don't have a specific metric that you're looking for, you can always go back to the Browse All Display Columns section here by left clicking and go into, yes, Customize Display Columns, where you're met with a smaller display column criteria section here. But if we're looking for specific metrics, we can go into financial statements information and get specific metrics based on, once again, the profitability, growth, features, and basic numbers that we're all familiar with. Or we can go into industry-specific financials. If we left-click in this one, we can get another picture of the many different ways of looking at industrials companies that we could go through this and look at it forever. Maybe home builders would be a good example here because we're looking at building products companies. We can look at maybe some specific metrics here if we did some initial digging or had a really good understanding of that industry. I personally don't, so I don't know what's the best way to value a building products company, but this is always a great place to look. Or we can exit this and we can get a picture of what CapIQ's professional analysts are expecting when it comes to future financial performance. We just click estimates there when we can see consensus data based on the analyst's understanding of target price or earnings per share. Or if we click out of this, we can see the prospects for estimated growth. What do analysts expect to be the annual EPS growth over the next 2 years, EBITDA growth over the next year and 2 years, revenue growth as well. And we can click one of these. We can let's get a picture of this. We want the revenue growth over the next 2 years. I think that'll be a great display column to get a picture of maybe which companies are expected to grow over the next couple annual periods. And we can just add this column. We're not screening by anything. We're not eliminating any companies. So we can really add in any metrics we want. I know when I'm doing this on my own time, I like to throw in metrics that I don't even know what they mean into these columns. And then when I download it to download it to Excel, I can get all kinds of different ways of looking at the individual companies. And these are just a couple here, but in order to speed this along and show how useful it is in Microsoft Excel, I'm just going to click that View Results section there. And now it's updated with a few different metrics that I added in on my own merit. And once we've done this, it's much easier to get a better understanding of these metrics when we move over to Microsoft Excel. So if we click Go after we click Excel here, it'll usually default to selecting Excel. We can click Go, and assuming you're on Chrome like me, it'll take a couple seconds, but it should pop up right here, and you can open up a CapIQ generated Excel document with all of your individual companies and these display columns that you can then analyze further on Microsoft Excel. So as you can see here, it finally downloaded, and I got impatient and clicked it twice, so it downloaded twice. But as soon as we left click here on company screening, it'll open up a brand new Excel doc that we can start to analyze further based on the metrics that we want to look at. It opened on my second monitor, but as soon as we've got access to this screening report, we're going to enable editing, obviously, so we can continue to manipulate this data further. And what I like to do is utilize the conditional formatting section of Microsoft Excel to get a better picture of maybe which of these companies are above or below the median based on these specific EBITDA and SG&A and growth features. It doesn't have to be the median, but I like to type in median here so I know what I'm looking for, or upper quartile, or just simply average. And now we can utilize the Excel formula builder in order to look at these numbers further. So I can just type in equals median and then highlight the range of data, press enter. And now I can see that the median EBITDA margin is 15% for all these building products companies and these indices. And if I move this formula over here, utilizing Control R, be sure to check out the Microsoft Excel mill workshops to get a better picture of shortcuts. And now that we've got our median data here, we can now look at and utilize that in order to highlight specific companies in this space that are greater than the median. Because if you're more profitable than the median, you may be a better investment opportunity. So we can highlight all of this data, press conditional formatting, highlight cell rules that are greater than, and if we use this arrow here, we can select the cell where we had already calculated the median and click back out. And I like to make it green because it's a good metric to have, and press OK. And now that we've highlighted all of the companies that are greater than the median, and this is obviously a great sign. And we're going to do the same thing for SG&A margin as well as estimated revenue growth. Now, if it's SG&A margin, we would probably want companies that are lower than the median, because if you can save more money on SG&A while also maybe even being highlighted for EBITDA margin, you could be a better investment opportunity. I'm going to show you what I mean here. We're going to highlight these, except we're not going to highlight the median cell right there. Conditional formatting, highlight cell rules that are less than, utilize this arrow, 16.6 for our median data, and we're going to make this green again and press OK. So now we can see that we're starting to form a pattern here, because if a company is highlighted in both spaces, that means that they may be a particularly successful in this overall industry because they're continuing to check the boxes on individual criteria. Now, if we had just simply eliminated a few companies, based on like the CapIQ screener, we may have improperly eliminated some companies that maybe aren't that successful in one metric, but in every other metric they're super strong in. And that would be some inorganic ways of screening down your potential companies. So continuing to do these conditional highlightings are a really great way of getting a better picture of how to screen for companies and how to utilize your own brain in your own Excel document to screen for individual companies. So hopefully that was really helpful, a good way of seeing how you can sort of lead the charge when it comes to a screen that you're doing. And that pretty much wraps up the ideas behind individual company screening skills and strategies that you can employ. Like I said, there's two ways of really doing it, and I hope I demonstrated here. You can just simply eliminate based on financial metrics, or eliminate based on industry or indices, or a number of different criteria that you can explore on that same criteria tab. Or you can just whittle down based on a specific industry that you want to look at further, or a specific stock index that you want to look at further. And then when you are able to download all those companies to Excel after adding in your customized display columns, you can then start to manipulate the data yourself and eliminate more subjectively, but still fundamentally analyzed, to really utilize your own brain when it comes to screening for the best investment opportunities for your or some professional portfolio. So hopefully this was helpful. The CapIQ screen builder is really great, really helpful. So thank you for checking in, and hopefully you can then check out some subsequent videos on other ways to screen and utilize CapIQ. Thank you.